Good morning. It is Saturday, April the 9th, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Pledge of Allegiance, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have no free lunch, Disrespect, which is the chapter 1 of the book, The Collapse of Parenting, and then the World Series Game 3 from the book, My Bicentennial Year. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now, the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 9th. You are redeemed from the curse through the blood of Jesus. You are the seed of Abraham, and I have redeemed you from the curse through the blood of my Son, Jesus. I have given you blessing instead of cursing, and life instead of death. I will break and release you from all generational curses and iniquities that came as a result of the sins of your ancestors. I have broken all curses of witchcraft, sorcery, and divination against you through the power of my Son. I will break and rebuke all curses of sickness and infirmity in my Son's name. You have been redeemed. You are set free. Galatians chapter 3, verses 13 to 14, Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26. Prayer declaration. I choose blessing instead of cursing, and life instead of death. The blood of Jesus Christ has redeemed me from the curse. No longer will I fear the curse of the enemy, for I have been set free by the power of Jesus Christ. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for April the 9th. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He is religious and realistic. He is the person that understands that culture is the foundation for politics. He acknowledges a benevolent universe. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Thank you, thank you. What is the true conservative strategy for defeating socialists in this country? Number one, we must properly define conservatism. Then we must organize all potential conservatives under that definition. Once organized, we must dominate American culture. Dominating American culture means that we must rid ourselves of all the various cults the left has foisted upon us in this country. We rid ourselves of the left-wing cults by promoting value. What are the universal values? Number one, life. Number two, privacy. Number three, time. Number four, sanity. Number five, productivity. We defeat promiscuity by promoting family and privacy. Socialists must be driven from positions of power. And since it is lefty counterculture that provides the foundation for their political success, true conservatives must resist left-wing counterculture and promote normal American culture. By changing our culture, we will change our politics. And we change the culture by getting married, creating a family, and raising our children. Thank you, thank you. What are the tactics in support of the strategy to rid America of socialist influence? The long-term tactics are to be a true conservative, talk like a conservative, act like a conservative, dress like a conservative, think like a conservative. The short-term tactics are rhetorical. True conservatives need to win all of the arguments. True conservatives need to defeat the useful idiots on the left that populate their households, workplaces, and churches. That means don't be neutral. Don't try to prove a negative. Don't take their word for it, and ask lots of questions. The useful idiots are the people that simply repeat the latest talking points. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative political priorities? Number one, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number two, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number three, the immediate decertification of all public employee unions. Number four, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number five, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number six, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number seven, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. Number eight, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. And 10, means-tested health care. Thank you, thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back not-for-profit news. Number 2, destroy the cult of promiscuity. Replace with an emphasis on privacy. Number 3, destroy the cult of neutrality with the effective use of propaganda. Number 4, destroy the cult of personality by emphasizing character. Number 5, destroy the cult of imagination, psychologists, and Hollywood. Number 6, destroy the cult of reinvention by admitting your mistakes. Thank you, thank you. The biggest mistakes that right-wing talk show hosts make. Number 1, they fail to consult their consciences. Number 2, they fail to listen to their own shows. Number 3, they aid and abet the left. Number 4, they demoralize their audiences. Number 5, they contradict themselves. Thank you, thank you. And now there's no free lunch. Quote, all people, however fanatical they may be in their zeal to disparage and to fight capitalism, implicitly pay homage to it by passionately clamoring for the products it turns out. Unquote. Ludwig von Mises. Oh, the irony, but so true indeed. The modern caricature is especially comical as some hipster drinking a specialty drink at an artisan coffee shop uses an $800 smartphone to broadcast via 600 billion social media outlet the great evils of free enterprise and moral superiority of socialism. And that was, there's no free lunch. Thank you. And now, the collapse of parenting section from Chapter 1 on the collapse of parenting, how we hurt our children when we treat them like adults. Before we go any further in our discussion of the loss of parental authority, I have to make sure you and I are on the same page with regard to what I mean by parental authority. I have learned that when I speak to parents, many confuse parental authority with parental discipline. They think that parental authority is all about enforcing discipline. In fact, parental authority is primarily about a scale of value. Strong parental authority means that parents matter more than same-age peers. In contemporary American culture, peers matter more than parents. For most of the history of human race, children have learned culture from the adults. That's why childhood and adolescence have to last so long in our species. But in the United States today, kids no longer learn culture from the grown-ups. American kids today have their own culture, a culture of disrespect, which they learn from their peers and which they teach to their peers. When I speak about the culture of disrespect, I'm referring not only to the ingratitude seasoned with contempt already noted, which is now the characteristic attitude of many American kids toward their parents. I mean also that American kids now commonly show disrespect toward one another, and that they live in a culture in which such disrespect is considered the norm. 5 decades ago, the Beatles' single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, was a worldwide hit. In 2006, Akon released a single titled, I Want to F You. The clean version, titled, I Want to Love You, was broadcast on radio, but the original version with a foul language was the one that reached number 1 in the United States. T-shirts. Here's some of the slogans I've seen American kids wearing on T-shirts recently. Do I look like I care? Out of your league. Is that all you got? You look like I need another drink. Or its variant, buy me another drink, you're still ugly. I don't need you, I have Wi-Fi. You looked better on Facebook. These T-shirts are not intended primarily for display to adults, men over 25, women over 22. These T-shirts are meant to be seen by same-age peers. These slogans on these T-shirts epitomize disrespect for one another. It's not just hip-hop and T-shirts, it's everywhere. Even the Disney Channel actively promotes the culture of disrespect and undermines the importance of parents. Consider the most popular shows on the Disney Channel, such as Jessie, a sitcom in which the parents are almost always absent and irrelevant, while the 3 kids are more competent than the bungling butler and the ditzy nanny. Or Liv and Maddie, in which the pathetic mom, who happens to be a school psychologist, is regularly put to shame both by her girly girl daughter and her tomboy daughter, both played by the same actress. Or Dog with a Blog, in which the father is a psychologist, another psychologist, who knows nothing about the behavior of children, a peculiarity that leads to much well-deserved mocking of the father by his children. The father's cluelessness is a recurrent laugh line in the show. The talking dog is more insightful than the father. You don't have to look far to see how American culture has changed in this regard. The most popular TV shows of the 60s through the 80s consistently depicted the parent as the reliable and trusted guide of the child. That was true of the Andy Griffith Show in the 60s. It was true of Family Ties in the 80s, but it's not true today. Looking through the list of the 150 most popular TV shows on American television right now, I did not find one that depicts a parent as consistently reliable and trustworthy. It's tough to be a parent in a culture that consistently undermines parental authority. 2 generations ago, American parents and teachers had much greater authority. In that area, American parents and teachers taught right and wrong in no uncertain terms. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Those were commands, not suggestions. Today, most American parents and teachers no longer act with such authority. They do not command. Instead, they ask. How would you feel if someone did that to you? The command has been replaced by a question. American parents and teachers struggle to respond when the student replies. If someone did that to me, I'd kick him in the nuts. Even when students produce the canned answer they know the grown-ups want to hear, they are merely regurgitating. They have digested nothing, no real communication across the generations. The most important feature of enculturation has occurred. What does it mean to assert your authority as a parent? It doesn't necessarily mean being a tough disciplinarian. Among other things, it means ensuring that the parent-child relationship takes priority over the relationships between the child and her or his same-age peers. Not just for toddlers, but for teenagers as well. It means the parents are doing their job, fulfilling their biological role, if you like, of teaching the child how to behave both within and outside the family unit. Recall that the purpose of a prolonged childhood in our species seems to be, first and foremost, for the child to learn the grown-up culture from the grown-ups. When the parents lose their authority, when same-age peers matter more than parents, then kids are no longer interested in learning the culture of the parents. They want to learn the kiddie culture, the teen culture. Throughout this book, we will see just how harmful that is. The benefits of a parental authority are substantial. When parents matter more than peers, they can teach right and wrong in a meaningful way. They can prioritize attachments within the family over attachments with same-age peers. They can foster better relationships between their child and other adults. They can help their child develop a more robust and authentic sense of self, grounded not in how many likes a photo gets on Instagram or Facebook, but in the child's truest nature. They can educate desire, instilling a longing for higher and better things in music, in the arts, and in one's own character. So that was a segment of Chapter 1 from the book, The Collapse of Parenting. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, back to the book, My Bicentennial Year. And it's a book about Gansevoort, New York, upstate New York, and childhood in Gansevoort, New York during the year 1975 to 1976. So, we dealt with Chapter 8, where it was we saw Boob, where they were playing games. They're between games of the World Series. Right now, the series between the 4th Street Kids and the 3rd Street Kids is tied up, 1 apiece. So they have a third game that they're going to play to try to settle the matter. And so last chapter, though, was about they were playing games, and they saw an older sibling making out with his girlfriend. So now, Chapter 9, the World Series, the deciding game of the Fall Classic. Sunday morning for me was a long one. We had to go to church, and of course, I had to altar serve with Tyrone. So I had to get there early, which meant I had to walk. It wasn't that far, but nonetheless, I had to leave before everyone else. This Sunday, all I had to really do was follow Tyrone around and watch him do everything, so that I knew when it was my turn to go it alone, what to do. He let me light the candles. He showed me how to first light this thing called a taper, which is a long, thin brass pole with a bell-looking thing on one end. On that same end, a little thin candle came out, which you pull out longer or push in to make it shorter. You lit the taper candle with the matches, and then you went out on the altar and lit the candles from the candle taper. When you had them all lit, you pulled the taper candle inside the brass pole, and it put out the taper candle. So I think I had that down. Tyrone also let me hold the books and bring out some chalices during the Mass for Father H. At communion, both Tyrone and I went to the lines of people coming up for communion and held the communion plate underneath the people's chin as Father H placed the communion wafer on their tongue. The hard part was not hitting someone in the Adam's apple with the plate. Church seemed to go on and on and on. All I could think about was the ball game and how bad we were going to beat those mutants. Father H gave a sermon on something. I didn't hear a word. The Mass finally ended, and Tyrone said I did okay and asked if I felt I was ready to give it a go alone. I said, "Sure, just let me know." Then Father H said, "Okay, next week you're on. It's all yours. Tyrone deserves a break." "Okay," I said. With that, we picked up after Mass. Father H said that he told my dad he would give me a ride home. After the last time, I wanted to refuse the ride and walk, but I also wanted to get home, change, and get with the guys for the big game. So I kind of hemmed and hawed about the ride, but Father H said he had to bring something for my mom anyways, so that was that. Father H was giving me a ride home. I did not want anyone to see me with the priest. I did not need any more holy roller jokes. Father H had a big Plymouth Fury 3 sedan, not the wagon we had. Since I didn't want anyone to see me, I sank far down in the seat as I could. I knew Father H was looking at me like, what is the kid doing? But I didn't care. Back in those days, the seats in cars, both in back and front, were like huge couches. I think you could have easily fit 10 people in both the front and the back seats. But anyways, I was taking full advantage of the big seats by slinking down. Just a note to any kids reading this, back in those days, they were just coming out with seat belts and baby car seats. You simply got in the car and drove. I think my mom used to just hold babies in her arms while we drove. I made it all the way to my driveway without being sighted by anyone. I got out of the car and started to run away when Father H yelled at me to come back to the car and help him with the religion class books for the class my mom was teaching. I slunk back to the car. I knew there was no way to make it now without a sighting. I went back to the car, and Father H gave me a stack of workbooks, and he got the other half. We walked up my front steps, and unbelievably, we made it into the house without being seen. Back in a minute. Thank you. My dad jumped up from his recliner, said hi to Father H, and almost ran to the TV. He quickly switched the channel from Worldwide Wrestling to Meet the Press. He did not want Father H to know he watched wrestling. Why? I'm not sure. My mom said thank you for the books and asked Father H if he wanted some coffee and donuts, but he said no, he had to get going. He shook my dad's hand and said to him what a big help I was at church. My dad opened the door and let him out and told me to walk him out to the car. I looked at my dad with the "Are you serious?" look, for which I got back the death stare answer, "Yes, I am." I got into the car, waved goodbye, and thought, thank God. I made it without being seen. Father H backed up the sedan and then did the unthinkable. He did the beep beep goodbye with his arm waving out the window. "See you next week," he yelled. The beep beep of the horn, of course, attracted the guys from out in my backyard where they were waiting for me to play ball. They were all thrilled to see Father H. The laughing and the holy roller jokes were coming. The big joke today came from Bobby Donlin, head mutant. He goes, "Hit it at Mike today and we'll be sure to win." Why, you ask? He has a holy glove. With that, I went in to get changed. We were all in a baseball frenzy. We had a great day for this game, nice warm temperature, which for fall in the Adirondacks was not always the way, and sunny skies. For the first time of this historic match, we had a crowd. The moms and dads and all the other kids had taken up lawn chairs down the third base side, all 4th Streeters, of course. Only 3rd Street parent-child appearance was Mrs. Donlin, who could be seen for a little bit sitting on her upper deck off the kitchen. She had a pretty good view. We never saw her after the first inning, though. Mike C's dad was able to join us today, and he took up the umpire position behind second base. Mike C's dad in those days worked the swing shift at the Saratoga Dairy, and once in a while he brought home yogurt for everyone. This is the only day of the series he was not working. Mike C was pretty psyched his dad made it. The dads thought it was only fair, being that we were playing in our yard, that we had split the first 2 games, that we give the 3rd Streeters the choice to hit last or first. Amazingly, they picked to hit first. We thought this crazy and foolish. You always wanted last ups. We mocked Bobby Donlin pretty bad for this choice until he said, "You guys are all morons. The team that hit first in the first 2 games won. We will hit first in this game, and we will win it." He was a mutant, he was mean, but he had a point. We went through the first 4 innings with the 3rd Streeters leading 8-7. This game had been a series of errors, as were all of our games. There were drop balls, overthrown balls, kicked balls, and lost tempers all day. The top of the fifth and final inning had arrived. Timmy, JJ, and TJ were up, the bottom three of their lineup. If we could get them to go 1, 2, 3, we felt pretty good that we could score at least one run and keep it alive in extra innings. After fouling off a couple of pitches, Timmy popped up to Brad at second, one down. JJ was pretty patient for him. He waited and waited on his pitch. He almost refused to swing. I guess in his mind, if he didn't swing, by our rules, he could not strike out. Finally, my dad said, "Where do you want it? You show me with your bat, and that's where I'll throw it." JJ put the bat about belt high. My dad threw it right there, and JJ swung with all of his might and hit a liner to Mike C. at third. Mike's eyes bugged out. He stuck out his glove and caught it. 2 down, 1 to go. This left their chances of scoring again up to TJ Belly Button Picker. He swung at the first 2 pitches and missed. 2 strikes. 1 strike away from us hitting. My dad, for some reason, asked TJ where he wanted it. TJ put the bat kind of between his waist and chest. "You sure?" asked my dad. TJ nodded yes. My dad pitched the ball, and TJ cranked it. A hot ground ball right up the middle. It went right between Huge Gene and Brad. I ran up to it and threw it into Huge Gene, holding TJ at first. It was up to Bobby Donlin. Could he get a hit and drive home the winning run? I sure as heck hoped not. Bobby came up to the plate, spitting and snarling. His face was beet red, and he was sweating like a pig. Thank God my dad did not ask him where he wanted it. I was kind of hoping he would ask him where he did not want it. My dad threw the first pitch right down the middle. Bobby reared back and swung right through it. He missed it. "Strike 1, Mr. Tidwell yelled. Bobby was really snarling now. He spit again, and in came the second pitch. Bobby popped it up, straight up in the air, and it was coming straight down. Lee Harvey, catcher for us, would have to make the catch. Mr. Tidwell stood up from behind Lee to give him room to catch it. We were all yelling at Lee, "Get it, Lee, get it, Lee, it's yours." Lee was now standing. The catcher's mask was off, looking all around. Finally, Mr. Tidwell yelled at him, "Lee!" And as Lee looked back at Mr. Tidwell, he pointed straight up in the air at the ball. Lee, now about 5 or 6 feet behind home plate, looked straight up and saw the ball coming straight down. The problem was that while Lee saw the ball, his brain failed to react. No glove came up to catch it, no movement out of the way of it. Maybe he just did not see it, or maybe it was too close, or maybe he had no clue. Either way, the ball came straight down on Lee's forehead and bounced off towards our chicken wire backstop. Lee dropped to the ground, holding his head. "Foul ball," yelled Mr. Tidwell. Mr. Tidwell helped Lee up. We all came running into Lee. To his credit, he staggered around a bit and walked it off. Bobby Donlin quickly got back to the batter's box and waved to all of us to get going. My dad asked Lee if he was okay again. Lee said yes, and we all ran back to our positions. My dad raised his arm with the ball and looked around to make sure we were all ready. He then threw the third pitch into Bobby. Bobby reared back again and swung hard at it. This time he connected. It was a rocket, deep to center field. This, unfortunately, was to me. I looked at the ball and ran in for it, realizing that it was not the right move. I started running back. Oh no, it was going to go over my head. I'd better catch up to it. I ran as fast as I could towards the ball. I saw it coming down behind me. I reached out and dove for it. Glove open and up in the air. As I was diving down, the ball hit my glove, and then me, the glove, and the ball hit the ground at the same time. The ball bounced straight up in the air and came back down in my glove. The ball never hit the ground. I clenched the glove closed, rolled over, and raised the glove and ball in the air. "Out!" yelled Mr. Tidwell. "Fourth Streeters are up." I was relieved. It was our turn now. We had 3 outs to get 1 run. All I kept thinking about was that in Game 1, we also needed 1 run to stay alive, and we could not do it. Could we do it now? Score 1 run to stay alive. Our batting order for this inning was Lee batting in the 8th spot hitting first, Bard batting in the 1 spot hitting second, and me batting second in the lineup hitting third. We all reminded Lee it was his up. Lee got up and looked like he was on the verge of tears. He could feel the pressure. He started swinging the bat a little just to get moving and warm up. We were all yelling at him, "Come on, Lee, you can do it. You're Fred Lynn." Back in a minute. Thank you. While he was shaking now, Huge Gene got up and went over to him, put his arm on his shoulder, and moved him away from all of us. He bent down to Lee's face and said, "Lee, you can do this. It's one hit. You're not Fred Lynn. You're Lee Harvey. Lee Harvey hits ground ball to right field side. That's all we need you to do. Now, be yourself. Hit a ground ball to the field side. Just get it middle of the infield. Big June over at first is too slow to get it. Base hit. You can do it, Lee. Be yourself." Lee smiled now. He shook his head up and down and started saying to himself, "Yes, be myself. I can do it." "What do you like it, Lee?" asked my dad. Now, he had done that for all of the Third Streeters, bad hitters, so I did not want to hear them complain about it, which amazingly they did not. Lee moved the bat out over the plate at just about his knees. My dad said, "Really, Lee?" Lee looked up at him and yelled back, "Yep, there is my sweet spot." "Okay, here we go," said my dad. My dad raised his arm with the ball in it, looked around at the Third Streeters. "Are you ready?" They all nodded. He wound up and threw the ball right where Lee wanted it, just above the knees. Lee had a smile on his face. He hauled back and whaled it with all his might. He connected and the ball went right where he wanted, just past June at first base. It was funny to watch June try and get it. She kind of stumbled and staggered after it. But right past her it went, just like Huge Gene said. Lee was on first, to applause and cheers from the crowd and even us. Even his mother was there to cheer for him, not so much minding the ball field now. Brad was up now with no outs and Lee on first. Brad wanted this hit bad. Gene looked at him from the bench and nodded. Brad nodded back. We don't know what they were nodding at, some kind of brother telepathy, I guess. The pitch came in. Brad hit a short pop-up. Bobby Donlin at shortstop came running in for it, waving his arms out and yelling, I got it, back off." And he did, right in his glove. And then he came over to our side of the field and started yelling at us that the game was over. I was yelling back at him. Huge Gene, instead of getting sucked into Bobby's annex, yelled at Lee, who was standing on first. Lee looked up and Gene waved his arms to run to second. Lee woke up and started running as fast as he could to second. Bobby was busy giving us crap on the third base side. June was now yelling at Bobby, "He's running, Bobby, throw the ball." Bobby whipped around and saw Lee about halfway to second. Smartly, he did not even throw it. He looked at the ground and swore at himself, tossed the ball to my dad. My dad yelled out, "Play over, safe at second with a sacrifice." Pretty smart of old Huge Gene. Now it was my turn to hit. My dad threw the first pitch, and it was a zinger right by me. It seemed to me the old man was speeding up his pitches just for me. Second pitch was even harder. I looked at him like, "What the?" He looked at me, raised eyebrows, put his hands out like in a slow down motion with both hands. That calmed me down a little bit. He threw the third pitch right down the middle. It seemed a little slower, and I reached back, swung through, and connected. I stood there at home plate and watched this ball sail deep to left field. I could see the guys standing up and yelling. I started down the first base line in a slight home run trot. I was a hero for about 5 seconds. As I watched my deep ball, I saw J.J. Baden catch up to it and, of course, catch it. I was out. 2 outs. Lee was watching Huge Gene, who yelled at him right after J.J. caught it to run to third. He motored down and was safe at third. "Huge Gene, Huge Gene, Huge Gene," we all started saying really low. It started as a whisper and then grew slowly until we were screaming, "Huge Gene, Huge Gene, Huge Gene." Huge Gene was up with 2 outs, and Lee Harvey, stunned to be there, on third. We had 2 outs, and we were behind by 1 run in the bottom of the 5th. This was our Little League World Series last inning. This was it. We knew Huge Gene could do it. All we needed now was a hit for a tie and a home run for a win. Back in a minute. Thank you. My dad pulled down the brim of his ball hat, wiped the sweat from his brow, and he bent down, putting his hand on his knee. He looked at Huge Gene and proceeded to give Gene his death stare. Gene stood tall in the batter's box, his back elbow up in the air and his front arm in. He looked right back at my dad, dipped his head down, spit out a loogie, and said very calmly to my dad, "Just pitch it." That was it. Dad stood back up, raised up his right hand with the ball in it, looked around at all the third streeters and asked them, "You boys ready?" They all shook their heads, "Yep." Bobby Donlin still had a mean stare on his flushed face. Dad went into his windup, raised his arm back, followed through, and fired that ball in. I'm pretty sure there was a trail of smoke coming from it. It was so hot. It almost knocked TJ belly button picker on the ground. It was so hard. Gene swung through it like he was Paul Bunyan. He missed the thing by a mile. Mr. Tidwell looked at Gene all mad and said, "Quit trying to be Pete Rose and just swing like you know how." Dad started his wind-up again, came down quick again, and let her rip. Gene was getting the old man's best stuff. You could see it in Gene's eyes. He was focused in on this one. He swung the bat, and it connected. It went deep, deep, deep into center field. With 2 outs, already everyone is yelling at Lee to run. But he was standing in third, waiting to tag. Brad almost went down to third and lead Lee home by the hand. Lee finally started running home. Lee Harvey came into home plate and added a nice hop into it. Chris Fartwell was playing huge Gene pretty deep in center field to begin with, but the ball was getting behind him. He jumped on it, though, and from our angle seemed to be closing in on it. Gene had made it to first, and the ball was still in the air. Gene rounded first way out into right field almost and started heading towards second. We saw Chris leave his feet and dive for the ball. We saw the ball hit the ground and bounce up in the air. Chris jumped right back up and took off after it. Gene touched second and was barreling towards third. Chris finally caught up with the ball, set himself, and heaved it towards TJ at home plate. Gene rounded third and was heading home. Chris's throw was a good one, heading right towards TJ standing a few feet in front of home plate. Bobby Donlin had made it behind TJ to back him up. We're all standing, jumping, screaming, and hugging up and down the third base line. Gene wanted this. Heck, we all did. You could see it in Gene's eyes. He was gearing up for his famous Pete Rose headfirst dive. You see, Gene loved old Charlie Hustle. Gene went for it, threw his body up in the air, and dove like he was Superman trying to fly. TJ was scared poopless. He saw Big Gene coming at him, turned around, and ran away. Bobby immediately jumped in to catch Chris Fartwell's throw. Chris had always had a great arm, but this throw was crazy. It was a bullet coming right at Bobby and Gene. So exact was it that it came in right on the back of Gene's head. Pop was the sound it made. It bounced off his head and went sailing over the backstop into Lee's yard. Back in a minute. Thank you. Gene dropped straight to the ground, like someone who had just shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet. Gene dropped a good 2 feet short of the plate. Gene was out cold. He was not moving. We were in stone-cold silence. It was almost like slow motion. The jumping, hugging, yelling all stopped. My dad and mom and Mr. and Mrs. Tidwell and heck, all the neighborhood moms and dads ran towards huge Gene. All of us just stood there speechless. My dad and Mr. Tidwell picked big huge Gene up by each putting one arm under one of his arms and one hand under each leg and started carrying him home. Huge Gene was drooling all down the front of his dirt and sweat-soaked shirt. All of a sudden, Mike C. yells out, "Hey, what about the game? We're all tied up. You can't stop now." Mr. C., this time not my dad, looked back at Mike C. with his own Italian version of the death stare, and he made the final call. "The game and the series is over. You tied. You should be happy and proud." And with that came the end of the real World Series of 1975. Not that Red Sox-Reds one. The controversy remains today. Who really won? And that's the end of Chapter 9. And next time is going to be Chapter 10, Taking a Walk with Mom, from the book My Bicentennial Year. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. Who is the socialist? He is the man that is spiritual. He's the man that seeks consensus. He's subjective, petty, and small, taking everything in life personally. He's outrageous, boring, and rude. He pretends to be a leader and a change agent. He pretends that he's your friend. He is sly, cunning, and deceptive. He dresses, acts, and speaks like a slob. He is informal and terminally unique. He is childish and pretends that he knows nothing. He has no conscience and pretends that might makes right and that the ends justify the means. He is impulsive and rationalizes his behavior. He is deterministic, blaming others for his mistakes. He is skeptical, demanding that others solve his problems. His unreasonableness and irresponsibility make him a bad role model, bad father, brother, family member, friend, and a bad person, period. So if you think that you can be friends with a socialist, think again. Thank you, thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to tune in to the John and Ken Show, which is an excellent example of how true conservatives communicate. It's a radio show that's on KFI AM 640 from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 6 o'clock in the evening, Monday through Friday. And that's Pacific time. So that's an excellent show to listen to. And other than that, until next time, remember to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.